Hi, everyone. My name is Andy Bitter. Andreas is only my mother calls me that. Everybody else is Andy. That's right. I am an analyst. I've been an analyst for 15 years or so. Before that, I spent a long time also on the vendor side. So basically, I did database and business intelligence from the beginning from my university. Congratulations to the winners of the university awards. I also did my diploma back then from the University of Darmstadt with a company that I worked for and built a database back then. The Digitally Remastered Enterprise is a title that I picked because I wanted to find out whether there's actually an analogy between the digital remastering of music and what we do in organizations. So let's look at some of these trends, and obviously digitalization is one of these top trends that we see. There's consumerization and agility and all these kind of self-service kind of ideas, but digitalization is certainly one of those topics that come up all the time. So what does that mean to us as an organization, digitalization? I could make the argument that we're already there. We have switched from analog to digital in terms of photography, in terms of music. You're all sort of digital natives, or at least digital immigrants, because you all run around with digital devices. So that means digital is already there. Now, for us as organizations, that's a totally different story. Many brick-and-mortar organizations, whether they're in retail or in insurance or banking, they're still kind of running the organizations as if there was an analog business. So processes are rather analog and so on. And for them, sometimes these digital trends are certainly a big challenge. Then there is totally new organizations that are purely digital. They are, typically you talk about the LinkedIn and the Facebooks and the Twitter. They're basically just purely digital organizations. They don't have that kind of challenge. They have other challenges, but we would like to be more like a digital organization. So what if we really could digitally remaster our company, our organizations? What would we need to do? So as Professor Dindischer said, digital remastering is a term of the music. I'm a musician. I started playing piano when I was 6. And so I kind of grew up in this. And I bought a lot of these. These are called CDs. You may have heard of them. And there's music on them. And these are 2 samples of old recordings, relatively old recordings. And they, at some point, have been digitally remastered, which means that we took the old analog signal, typically on tape, on 2-inch tape, and whatever, 24 tracks, and then we brought them into the new world by digitizing all the content and remixing them, doing new things that we couldn't do on the analog business. So there is this kind of trend of digital remastering music to basically just take out some of the old noise and so on. So I asked this guy. This is one of my best friends. His name is Holger Urbach. I've known him pretty much for all my life. We went to school together, and he just turned out to become one of the best audio engineers in the world. So he produces 350 CDs on the classical side, so he knows all the big stars in the classical world. So I recently just went to him in Düsseldorf to take photographs for his new website. So we went to his studio, and so I asked him at some point, what do you do if you digital remaster music? So let's assume you have an old Beethoven symphony from Toscanini or some old recording like that, and may even be a mono recording. What would you do? What are the steps that you would need to follow to take that analog signal into a digital remaster? And he told me these things. So he would remove noise and crackle. That's pretty obvious. Obviously, old recordings have a lot of noise, pink noise, white noise, and crackle. These kind of noise basically in the recording. Then you correct cutting errors. Back then, if you were doing a recording and you had multiple takes, you had to really cut the tape physically and glue it together. By that, sometimes the gluing wasn't really very good, or the glue kind of disappeared, and then you have some of these damaged tape kind of problems. You repair wound flutter, which means that the speed of either the turntable or the tape recorder wasn't really equal. So I mean, you had kind of flows in the speed of the music. So that's what would need to be kind of taken out digitally. There's many other things. This next one sounds like magic to me. He can pump mono to stereo. So you have one signal and can make two of them. You mix new things. So these are all the various steps. I don't want to go into much of a music excursion here, but there's many of these steps that he would need to do as a digital remastering exercise. So what I did is I tried to find an analogy for some of those steps and turn them into kind of business steps. So we would remove data noise. We would standardize definition. This is something, certainly one of the things that are dear to my heart is data quality. As a data warehousing institute, all of you are doing BI of some sort, analytics. If you don't take care of data quality, all of what you do is pretty much in vain. Because what is the best dashboard on the most scalable data warehouse worth if the data is still wrong? So we want to have standardized definitions and data quality as part of these kind of steps, so correcting data errors. Then process breaks. Quite often, you have multiple systems and they're not really connected. Sometimes export something and it's typically Excel and it's imported somewhere else. So this isn't really a digital process. So we would need to maybe do some process reengineering. We may, as he says, pump mono to stereo. We may need to pump some more data. This is typically, the big data kind of initiatives that we see everywhere, where organizations are looking outside of the organizations, trying to figure out what other data is out there that we could actually use to correlate with our internal data about our customers and our products and our supply chain. This is, the new data mix. So we're actually mixing data that we have internally and trying to find out what other sources may be important for us. Usability is certainly something. We promote new data visualization. That's why some of these interactive visualization vendors are so successful in the market right now. And again, there are many others of these kind of new steps that I would see as important steps in order to become more of a remastered enterprise. This last one is important because that kind of is one of the things that organizations just don't do. Design a new group that actually takes care of some of this digitalization and some of these new big data and some of these creative kind of things. Because if there's one thing that I see consistently in organizations that actually say, we want to become the next generation of ourselves, there is a total lack of creativity in terms of what do we need to do in order to actually come up with some of these brand new ideas. I have a whole bunch of examples later on where I'm trying to show is that people were just thinking outside of the box. Not just like, these are our customers, these are our orders, and these are our products, and these are our vehicles, these are facilities. So they're pretty much this inside view of everything, and this kind of digital think tank, this kind of a new group that just gets the task to really think really strategically. So digital everything. You are all digital. You are all sensors. You're all walking sensors right now. You may not have one of these kind of wristbands here, but I mean, you're all running around with cell phones where everybody can track you basically much. And when you opt in, I have an example later where it really has a huge impact by enabling a company to track where you are and what you do. So there's many other kind of examples. This is certainly one of the biggest ones with Facebook, with 2.5 billion new content items, about 300 million photos uploaded, and about 500 terabytes of data generated every day. Now, obviously, it's a theme of big numbers. I have another example in a minute where it blows my mind in terms of how much data we are actually starting to collect as an organization. And it's certainly not just, again, our regular OLTP data that sits in our ERP systems. It's the other data, this quote-unquote unstructured data that we actually start collecting, but that has a lot of value all by itself once we correlate it with our internal data. And we are really just at the beginning. This red circle is what everybody has started with. Transactions, customer data, product data, point of sale, and that's where it typically is the kind of data domains that end up in a data warehouse. Then, a couple of years ago, we started talking about this kind of unstructured side with text information and images and audio and video and some of those. But even then, we haven't really seen anything yet. Once we start looking on the right side of this chart, when the enormous growth, the volumes are just totally exploding. And social data and sensor data certainly are the ones that everybody talks about. There's other things, streaming data, health data, location data, mobility data, And I have an example on meteorological data, where organizations are picking up the weather data to actually make totally critical business decisions based on how the weather works and how the wind works and so on. So there are certainly many other sources that you as an organization should really look at, because there is value in them once you start correlating them with your internal data. So smart meters is certainly one of these topics that allows us now to be more energy efficient. I know of people that actually have a smart meter application that allows them to better organize even their homes. Now consider doing this in an industrial environment where you actually can reduce your energy consumption by 10%. How much money that would entail as an organization if you would have a $100 million energy bill every year. 10% of that is real money. So smart meters and are certainly one of the way to go. The same in logistics. We actually have so much information in the supply chain, which box sits on which shelf, in which aisle, and which robot would actually be able to pick it up to send on which device and to which customer. So there's enormous value in digitizing some of those internal processes from the supply chain perspective. This is certainly the one that everybody talks about. This is a smart car. Now, there is this one story, I'm not sure whether it's true, where the car collected so much information that it can actually at some point be pulled into a court trial, and the car actually is witness against you, because you may be in trial because you had an accident, and you say, I drove 50 kilometers an hour. The car, however, knows that you didn't drive 50 but 80, and if there's some kind of regulation in terms of whether that actually is admissible in court, you could actually see yourself being testified from your own car, because the garage actually knows more about your driving habits than you do, because there's all these kind of sensors about how fast you drive and how much you brake and where you are. So there's all this kind of information is collected. Now, there are ethical reasons, there are security reasons, there are privacy reasons, while this may not totally work in the way technically we could actually do this. But there is certainly a lot of information that we could actually leverage for a business. So all these examples are all nice, but what are we supposed to do with all this kind of stuff? And it's BI, it's business intelligence of some sort. But I want to point out, I'm looking for the creative kind of BI. I can't tell you how many times I've been talking to organizations that are saying, we want to do BI, and then if you start digging a little bit deeper, all it comes down to is reporting. And I think that's just so boring. So while I don't think that reporting ever goes away, reporting is certainly not the end. Reporting, if anything, could be the beginning of some kind of insight that you start doing something. In fact, I tweeted many, many years ago that BI is not there to let you know. BI is there to let you act, do something. Now, I kind of doubt that lots of people are generating reports just to look at them because they look nice. So hopefully there is something coming after, because that's the real reason why we do BI in the first place. So what are these creative kind of BI implementations that I'm talking about? Because this is, again, one for my friends in Austria. This is obviously City Hall in Vienna. And this is how organizations really want to have their BI architecture look like. Nice architecture, right? Nicely illuminated, so you see very evenly spread across all the lines of business. This one in the middle is finance, it's a little bit more equal. Then there's it's timely information, some illuminated people, and you have a great oversight over their business. This is basically how we want BI. Good architecture, solid, nice to look at. And this is what we end up with. This is Marrakesh, and this is basically your Excel hell that we are all kind of known very well. So there's absolutely no organization, everybody does what they want, everybody builds what they want, and if you're not careful, your self-service BI implementations going exactly that same way. Because self-service has this added danger of having anarchy implemented in it. Because self-service is a good idea. I'm not against self-service at all. I think it's probably one of the best ideas we have, as long as there is some governance structure around it. Because if your users are thinking self-service is basically just Excel on steroids, then you're going down the wrong way. Because what you end up is having all these little kind of self-service implementations, all totally disconnected with different definitions, no data quality, no standards, and so on. So be careful there. So we need to, obviously, in order to actually have this kind of governance, we need to organize. And that's a really old slide. I apologize for that, but it's still absolutely relevant. We need to have this BI organization. We call it the BICC, we call it BI Governance Board, the Steering Committee, Program Office, call it what you want. But you want to have this group of people that basically defines what your BI strategy actually looks like. As you see, there's on one side, this is a demand side. These are the people that we do BI for. These are the people in the lines of business and marketing and sales and production and HR and everywhere else. On the right side, we have IT, which is the supply side. We are supplying the information in the data warehouse and the reports and dashboards and everything else to the users. And the outcome of that kind of steering group is, or should be, a real BI strategy. Now, many years ago, I typically polled the audiences about who actually has a BI strategy, and it was typically pretty pathetic, that result, because hardly anybody really had a proper BI strategy. Now, everybody says BI is totally strategic for us, but then they don't have a strategy. I'm not sure exactly how that kind of fits, unless maybe having a strategic value to you means it's really important. Now, okay, that may be the case, but a proper BI strategy is sort of the foundation of your BI program. The problem is organizations don't even understand what a strategy is. I talk to organizations that are saying, we as an organization, we want to grow to 2 billion by 2020. We want to actually be a market-leading company with environmentally friendly products. These are all great goals. But this isn't a strategy. So this is obviously a racing track here, Hockenheim. So your goal, your racing goal would be to win the race, to come in first over the finish line. That's your goal, but that's not your strategy. The same with your architecture. Every once in a while, I talk to organizations that show me a nice chart about, okay, here's our data warehouse, and here's our data integration layer, and we have all these ERP systems from Oracle and SAP and others. We have a BI layer, we have got Cognos here and SAS, and we've got ClickView and Tableau. This is our BI strategy. It's not. It's maybe an architecture. And I once wrote that if the Ferrari Formula One team had a racing strategy of, yeah, we're using Bridgestone tires, we're going to use Shell fuel, and we're going to use red paint. That's not a strategy. That's maybe your architecture of your car. So obviously you don't know what a strategy is. The strategy is actually the plan how to reach that goal. And that's very different. You need to talk about who's doing it, how are we doing it, when are we doing it, what are the priorities, what is the alignment. And here is, for example, wow, what a sound. Here is an example of what I would call sort of the table of content of a proper BI strategy document. So you talk about the objectives and some of the scope. Is it just for a country, or is it just for lines of business, or is it worldwide? We talk about the current state and some of the historical arguments here. Then it gets really meaty, because now we're talking about the requirements and some of the business cases behind that. And the requirement is not, we want to send out reports. The requirement should be in the context of the business, in terms of what is the marketing person or the marketing department going to do with all the information on the reports and dashboards and the forecasts and so on, and what is the outcome, what is the business case for implementing that. And most organizations don't do that. They have no way of even figuring out why are we doing all this kind of BI stuff. So they just implement and buying tools until the cows come home and hope that there is some kind of good results with it. So having a proper BI strategy is absolutely essential in your BI program. And this is a living document, typically the charter of the BI Competency Center, and they are supposed to kind of put this together. So And if you do, there's a whole bunch of use cases. I want to go through a few of those. Don't expect to hear reporting from me, because none of those are. In fact, none of those even talk about data warehouses or reports or dashboards, but they're all highly relevant, highly influential, high impactful use cases. So some of these digital disruptors are certainly very interesting when you see about how do they kind of become a digital enterprise and basically change the whole dynamics of either another company or even the entire market. Like Netflix, basically pulled the rug from underneath Blockbuster and some of the other kind of rental places. Amazon, they once sold books, now they're doing pretty much everything. I store all my NAS information as a backup in Amazon as a big cloud service. Spotify, that was an interesting one. I recently talked to the guy who runs the Hadoop cluster for Spotify. Mind-boggling information, in fact. So maybe you want to take a guess how much information Spotify has in their Hadoop cluster. How many terabytes? Any guesses? No? No? 5, 10, 100? No, you wouldn't guess it. It's 40,000 terabytes. It's 40 petabytes worth of information. So I talked to them, wow, that's really a lot. But I then thought, yeah, there's lots of music on Spotify, millions of songs and multiple kind of servers and a bit of replication. He says, no. Those 40 petabytes don't even include the music. 40 petabytes worth of just metadata about you and your playlist and what song you played and who you follow and all the other kind of music that you may like and so on. That's 40 petabytes. Yes, there's some replication in it, but I mean, these are digital enterprises. I mean, they're just way beyond most of us. In that case, they're really totally digital enterprises. Here's another example in retail. And you see that I'm a big fan of location information in that context. You may have a retail store and you are starting to collect information of where the shoppers are. So either by tracking their cell phones when they get in, from some of the codes that they actually send up, or you might get much easier, you just put a near-field communication chip into the handlebar of your shopping cart, and then basically you just track people where they kind of spend their time. And they're coming in and they spend more time in the red zones and less time in the blue zones. So just imagine that in this lower right corner, there may be some shelves with products, and you just keep wondering from your reporting infrastructure, we don't sell these products. Why are we not selling them? And then you start lowering the price, and you're still not selling them. And then you figure out by looking at the location of the shopping cart that people just don't go there. So if nobody goes there, obviously nobody's going to buy these things. So you're putting together, again, your ERP data, your order data, and your shopping cart data together with location information, and suddenly it all makes sense. Oil and gas. I'm not a big expert on these, obviously. I've never been on one of these oil rigs, but I mean, certainly look pretty complex, even though you can say, well, they drill a hole in the ground and whatever comes up, they store in a tank. Well, that's what they do. So obviously there's a lot of pumps and valves and sensors and pipelines and so on. So about 10,000 or 20,000 of these kind of sensors on this thing alone. So, and there may be other information that we make sense of, some of these events. Something goes over 5, there's a certain pressure point. Then we start correlating then, and there's dependencies. If this happens and this happens, this better not happen. So there may be a few of these sensors that would allow us to kind of make sure we understand what's happening. Because the one thing that we don't want as the operator of this oil rig is to have an unplanned shutdown. Because it costs about $1 million a day, or maybe an hour even, to actually have this not operational. So we want to avoid this at all cost. So how do we find out when there is an unplanned shutdown risk? We want to figure out that if a certain correlation of certain sensors has a certain risk that somebody needs to push the big red button. And then maybe one of these gas flows kind of thing. This is a sensor. It's called gas flow J43FI81164, and you all know what that means. And so there may be a peak. There's a high peak of that kind of gas flow, then there's a low peak, and then suddenly this gas flow becomes unstable. And this may be your trigger event that if this becomes unstable and maybe the valve on this one is shut and the temperature on this one goes over 500, then there is a good risk of a unplanned kind of situation, which means that we need to kind of have some preemptive kind of corrections there. So obviously lots of data mining in there, lots of neural networks and time series and decision trees kind of figuring out what's actually happening. But this is obviously a very digital kind of enterprise here, trying to figure out what is happening to avoid some of these unplanned shutdown here. Another one based on location, also in retail, very interesting. If you're, let's say we have a store and the current store is in this kind of yellow bubble here on the lower right, and we want to build a new store. And now we want to figure out where is the best location for this new store. We have all the customer information, we have all the product information that are sold there, and now we actually add maybe demographics, sociographics, and figure out what is the location that has the most similar kind of buying behavior or sociographics, demographics of that current store in yellow. So we have maybe two proposed stores, and now we need to figure out which one is the better one, because we only can set up one. So we're looking at all the people that are living in this area. We're looking at the household information about income levels and so on. And typically what we do is we just draw a circle around that kind of location and pick up all the households in there, and then we're looking at the median income and what kind of ethnicities they have, and all sorts of other information. But obviously, people don't travel like this until you have a jetpack on your back. I mean, you can't just fly to the stores on a straight line, as they say, as the crow flies. We're sort of conditioned by roads and bridges and fences and buildings. So a more actual distance is if you would actually have this kind of it's sort of like a polygon here, because you can see now the information is kind of put together in a geospatial context. Now along the roads we can actually drive faster. So the inner circle is, or it's not a circle anymore, this inner kind of polygon is maybe 5 minutes drive time, the other one is 10 minutes drive time, 15 minutes drive time. Now we have a much more accurate representation of the buying behavior of this new store. So again, we're taking internal information about the buying patterns in our current store, trying to correlate it with demographics, sociographic, and find new locations, including geospatial and drive time and distances. There's another one. This is almost going into action. If you're an inventory manager and we're putting, again, information together directly from the shelf, we're using the camera to point at a certain product. We're doing image recognition from that content, trying to figure out what the kind of soup or whatever this is, some vegetable. We're figuring out what product this is. We're pulling information directly from a data warehouse and overlaying a dashboard directly on this kind of a device here. So now we're actually much more relevant in terms of the timing of this kind of decisions. Otherwise, we would look at a report sort of in the back office and figure out what other perishable goods have an expiration date, and then this inventory manager just walks up and down the aisle, picks up some of these products and makes decisions basically directly on the fly. No reports. There's a little bit of a dashboarding capability in here, but the decision and the action is happening right there at the point of interaction with the device. This one is a new one. It's actually one of my favorite ones because your farmer that's in your neighborhood may actually be more of a digital enterprise than you are. When you fly to Munich or anywhere else, you can actually see these fields that are kind of harvested almost like with a ruler. I mean, you can see these tractor lanes, and they're straight as an arrow. This is called precision harvesting. So this is certainly what we see. But if you dig deeper into precision farming, you could now actually use digital information about the soil, pesticides, water. So there's lots of kind of use cases if you're a farmer to actually use that information to actually have better yield. So you do yield monitoring, you do soil sampling, you go and take a little bit of dirt from whatever, 1 meter, 5 meters, depending on how big your field is. And now you start analyzing the soil, and based on the sulfate in the ground and the water irrigation, you actually can have a much better kind of irrigation and fertilization based on where it's actually needed. Typically, you just give everybody equally water, equally fertilizer, and in some equal spraying, you just spray the whole field because there's weeds. But with weed mapping and some of these information, your farmer actually can have a much better output based on the digital information that they pick up from some of these sensors in the ground, have much better yield going forward. So again, digital information in farming for weeds and yield monitoring and so on. Again, not your everyday kind of reporting infrastructure, but again, this is where it really has an impact. I would still argue that many of these reports are just created with absolutely no action whatsoever behind them. This is here in Munich, for example. This is called geofencing. Again, we're using location information to track a certain package of goods. Let's assume we want to kind of carry information from one place to another. This red flag is where we need to go. And we basically just tell the driver, because we have a really high value kind of cargo, you need to go on this road. And we're geofencing that road, which means that we will know whenever this truck or car leaves that kind of geofence. So there may be some area around that where it's sort of variable, so we don't just send an alert. So a little bit of variance is allowed, but once this car kind of leaves the area for a certain amount of time and a certain distance, we send an alert directly. So we want to make sure that there's nobody kind of stealing the car, or there's no other kind of impactful kind of action going on. So again, we're using digital information, geo-information about the goods, the car, the location, and the distances driven and so on. Again, another use case where we are becoming, as a logistics organization, a much more digital enterprise. Another one I found really interesting, I had no idea, because I thought wherever there's wind, you just put some of these propellers, and that's good. Turns out you don't want to have the propeller standing where there is the strongest wind. You want to have the propeller there where it's the most constant wind, which means that in order to find the constant wind, you need to have a certain timeline of how the wind patterns look like over the last, 10 years maybe. So some of these manufacturers of these propellers are looking at meteorological data, location data, and some of the preventive maintenance cost for the propeller, because it turns out if the propeller needs to speed up and then slow down and speed up, there is much more wear and tear on the propeller, which has a huge cost impact for them. So again, you're using business data, correlating that with the meteorological data to become more of a digitized enterprise. I just recently been in Tallinn. This is Tallinn, the capital of Estonia, and talked to a few customers up there, and one of which was government, Department of Health. And man, was I surprised how far they kind of included their digital information. If you're a patient and you see a doctor, you communicate online. The doctor then talks to the pharmacy for the prescription. The pharmacy actually sends you the prescription directly to your house. At the same time, the patient or the doctor actually sends information also to the insurance, and the pharmacy sends the information to the insurance, so you can actually get paid. And while they're at it, your employer gets notified that you're sick and you're not coming to work. All online. Now compare that to Germany, where you have to run around, you have to see the doctor. Well, you probably still need to see the doctor. It's not that he does online diagnosis, but you need to kind of send your thing. You have to walk into the pharmacy with your prescription from the doctor, and obviously they don't have the drug that you need. So you have to come back the next day, and then you have to kind of pay it, and you need to have the payment slip and send it to your insurance, and then you need to send another thing to your employer. So it's a little bit more complicated that we do it. So this is certainly very digitized as a process. I was very impressed. So maybe some of the health department here in Germany should go up to Tallinn one day. This is the last one. It's a really cool one. Have you heard of Meatpack? No, you haven't. Well, you may have been to the Meatpackers district in New York City, but Meatpack is a shoe store in Guatemala. And they're very creative in terms of how they do targeting of their customers. In fact, they created a marketing campaign that they call Hijack. Hijack means that they have an app on your phone, and you opt in that you can actually track your location. What they do then is the app tracks if you as a Meatpack customers are entering another shoe store in that mall. So they know exactly when you're there, and once they figure that out, they send you an alert directly on your phone with a discount of 99%, which means that they give you the shoe for free. And then, once you have this message, the clock starts ticking down. For every second that you wait, that discount goes down by 1%. So you better hurry up and get over out of this store into that store, because that's when you get the big discount. Here's a little video that explains that. I'm sorry for the dubstep music and the Pac-Man sounds, but I mean that's coming directly
I'm
from
in the Nike store. There he is. He's getting the message. There's a promotion for Meatpack. I think so. Yeah, we got him. Sick bubble gum!
Meatpack is the trendiest shoe store in Guatemala, a brand known for its edgy, cutting style and a store known for its unique discounts in limited edition kicks including brands like Adidas, Nike and Reebok. An icon for the sneakerhead subculture with over 60,000 fans on their fan page in less than a year. They needed to launch a new promotion that lived up to their hardcore fans, an innovative way to earn your discount. We created Hijack, an enhancement for the official Meatpack app used by our customers, using GPS tracking technology that marks every competitor's store of the brand sold at Meatpack. So every time one of our sneakerheads enters one of the stores, it triggers a special notice with a promotion. Hijack sends an alert to the person's mobile with a discount that starts at 99% and decreases by 1% every second that goes by, making the countdown stop until you reach our store. More than 600 customers were hijacked from the competitors in a week. One customer, Pedro Rodriguez, got a record-breaking 89% discount. This is the first promo campaign that started the sale in the competitors' stores.
Pretty cool marketing campaign, obviously. Lots of digitized information in there. So obviously there's a lot of creativity. So what are these all having in common? They use information creatively. I think that's the bigger one, the big one here. Use information creatively, and that really enables some digital transformation. In good Apple manner, one more thing. I just want to announce that we launched the BARC score about a month ago. This is our new methodology to evaluate vendors. This is the first one that came out in May. It's about enterprise-wide BI platform deployments. You can certainly see them, all the vendors that you can see here. We believe this is a much better representation of how the markets work compared to some of the other methodologies. With that, I want to thank you very much for coming. I'm the last one between you and lunch, so have a great lunch and have a great rest of the conference. Thank you.